My name is Robbie Luckett. I'm professor of history and director of the Margaret Walker Center at Jackson State University. Today is Thursday, December 2nd, 2021, approximately 1 p.m. Central Time. I am joined by Dr. Redell Hearn. Redell, for the purposes of this interview, will you state your name and spell it for us?
Sure. Redell Hearn, R-E-D-E-L-L. Last name is Hearn, H-E-A-R-N.
Do I have your permission to record this interview?
Yes, you do.
Thanks. Let's begin with some background information. Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, how you grew up, what your family life was like, your educational background, those sorts of things.
Sure. Well, I was born in Los Angeles, California, into large family, something medium-sized, but 2 parents and 6 siblings total. I'm number 5 of 6. I grew up in Culver City, which is on the west side of Los Angeles, and was educated primarily, my primary education in Culver City, and then went to Venice High School. So Southern California based all my growing years.
Yeah, and what was your family life like? What did your parents do?
My father was in the restaurant business. He actually owned restaurants in Houston and relocated to California to write recipes and worked in that industry. So that's what brought him there from Texas. Both of my parents are from Texas. My father from North Texas, north of Houston, Montgomery, and my mother from just outside of Katy, Texas, which is really now a suburb of Houston. And my mother was an educator. Primary education was her major in college. And so we were fortunate, I believe was very fortunate to grow up with her as an educator, and that being her field, and raising her children when she decided to do that. So.
Tell us a little bit about your educational background.
Post primary, I actually started at UCLA. I was in a program where I went to summer school at UCLA all of my summers of high school. And so when I graduated from high school, that was I thought it was going to be the natural fit to just go to UCLA. Found that wasn't for me at the college level. So I transferred to Long Beach State, where I had a brother and sister attending there. So I went a few years at Long Beach State. I pledged Alpha Kappa Alpha Sorority Incorporated while I was there, which was one of the great highlights of being there, because I'm still a part of the organization. But then I ended up transferring. My father died during that time. And I had a very, very close family that impacted my decision not to stay there. So I went to design school, went and studied design, and then ultimately transferred. I did a program to put a portfolio together for interior design. And I went through Syracuse University, studied abroad in Italy, and came back and went to Syracuse, and that was all she wrote. Never looked back. Finished my undergraduate degree there, 2 master's degrees, and my doctoral studies.
What led you to move across the country and go to Syracuse? Was it just the interior design program?
It was the program that I attended or completed in Italy for architecture was through Syracuse University. And at the time, I'm a football fan. So the only thing I knew about Syracuse was their football program. And my brother brought it to my attention. My next oldest brother to me, Dwayne, brought the program to my attention, and just thought just my state of mind and just being able to, go do something that I really was interested in. And, again, I was still in that period of grieving still. And so I went to that program and loved it, and had such a good time in the program, decided to take a look at Syracuse. And then, as fate would have it, also I had a sister who had just graduated from UC Berkeley, who's 3 years younger than me, and was making a decision between Harvard and Syracuse. She had offers to grad school, and So she called me in Italy and said, if you come back and you complete your, you want to complete your studies there, I'll go to Syracuse and we can go together. So when we went together, and she, like I said, 3 years younger than me, she finished her master's degree when I finished my undergraduate degree, my bachelor's.
So you're at Syracuse with your sister. You finish your undergraduate degree. Where does your path take you upon graduating from Syracuse?
So my path took me back to Los Angeles, back home. We both went back to California. I was on a design track. I mean, I was very much thinking that I was going to become an architect or work in design. And so that was my focus. I started design consulting independently and was building clients and working in that direction. And then I got a call from Professor Herbert Williams at Syracuse University. And he told me about a museum studies program and was calling to invite me to apply to the program. And it was two things that happened in that phone call. One, I had not heard of museum studies as an option for graduate school, but it made so much sense. And I applied for museum studies and went back so I left LA and went back to Syracuse for the Master's in Museum Studies program.
What was the museum studies curriculum like at Syracuse?
Well, I can tell you, my intention was design. I was very much focused on any aspect. And when I say design, structural design, interior spaces, exterior, so what I was hearing when Professor Williams was telling me about museum studies was, oh, exhibition design, that makes so much sense. And so that's really was the connector for me. But when I got there, the course that really changed me was, we had a small group. There were, so to give some historical context, there were always 9 students in the program for some reason. This time, it was a big deal because there were 11 students and 2 of them were Black. So what I didn't know at the time is that Professor Williams was recruiting Black students to the program, which is something that they had not graduated a Black student from the program. So I was one, and the other was my dear friend and colleague, to this day, Kelly Willits. And so I came with that direction of design. I had a degree in African-American studies and art history and interior design. But there was the conversation, we had a meeting that was really similar to a board meeting with all of us around the table and discussing the operations of the museum. And that really changed my perspective. And I wanted a bird's eye view, if you will, of the field. So the curriculum of the program, we were the 11 of us for 2 years together. And the balance between theory and practice was really the way the program was split. So our practicum was very heavy. We have a gallery on campus. We have a nice size collection. And so we worked a lot with putting exhibitions together, everything in the gallery from painting, moving walls, all of those hands-on things, framing work, cutting frames, cutting glass, but then also studying. So the theoretical side, discussing art history, speaking in curatorial terms, development. So really everything in the museum, from budgets and trustees to exhibitions. And I enjoyed all aspects of it. So that was a benefit for me, that the program curriculum was that broad.
You said it just made sense. So what was it that drew you to museum studies from your design background?
A place to be able to, I had this interest and had studied art history and also African-American art history. It was the creative part of being able to design these stories that would come to life. So not from just the place of writing something, but being able to visualize what was happening. And so my experience and studies up into that part, in terms of going into a room, for example, and knowing that what I want this to look like. If this wall comes out, you put a window over here and you elevate this side and leave this. So that part of recreating a space was very much of what I was used to doing. And so what I then looked at was visualizing a story. I could have a conversation about the idea about an exhibition, and I could see what was, it was easy for me to visualize what it would look like, what the flow would look like, what story I wanted to tell and how I wanted to tell it, and even how people might experience that story. And so in the way the program was set up, we started that early on. I mean, our first semester and our first exhibition was Howard Finster, which is very colorful, very created, so many objects that are familiar with you already, and putting them into an exhibition space. I was able to see that early on, the visual part of it and the storytelling.
You mentioned that Herbert Williams was recruiting African-American students, and you were there with Kelly Willits, who we've also interviewed for this project. Was there, it seems like maybe, but was there resistance to having Black students in the program or on the Syracuse campus? What did you face in that work?
I would say not necessarily intentional resistance, but an oversight and some kind of idea that this is not something we would be interested in, Black students would be interested in, or necessarily prepared for. And apparently that was part of the conversation that Professor Williams was in, that said, oh no, I know of students that would be, that are well suited for this program, and not only would be able to be a part of it, but could graduate from it and go on to careers in the field. So, I mean, his insight, and having had a couple of art history classes with him when I was at Syracuse, and then that was it. So it wasn't as if I had any kind of extensive experience around him, but so it was, the idea that we wouldn't necessarily fit. And then the experience of being there, initially not very welcoming, in the sense of, of us coming in and proving ourselves, or us coming in and being a part of something that was considered, it was different, for us to be there. We definitely had to find our voices and make our own way with what we were doing there. That's for sure. Mm-hmm.
So you finished this master's program. You obviously went on to do a doctorate at some point. Did you go straight into a doctoral program, or did you go into the museum field and work for a little bit? What was your next step?
Well, interesting. So the finishing out part of the Syracuse component, or being in the program and being first Black students in there, we had to have it was required that you have an internship at the end of your first year. And so of the 11 students, 10 had internships lined up and 1 didn't. And so that would be me. I did not get any internship that I applied for, wasn't accepted to any. And so we had completed a student project where we had applied, sent our application to the Smithsonian, just because our teacher thought we did such a good job, and said, this call for proposals came down. This is an opportunity to practice. And so we'll do this application and send it. You're not going to the Smithsonian, but this is a good experience to have. And so we had done that as a class project. I was getting ready to go home and say, there's going to be a museum that I'll find something to do in LA during this break. And then I got a call from the Smithsonian, from the experimental gallery. And Kimberly Camp was the director at the time. And I was invited to come and mount my exhibition as a visiting curator. And so, when you asked the question about what it was like being there and being the different people that were coming to integrate this program, so to speak, we had never had an internship at the Smithsonian in the program. And then I come along and as a student was invited as a visiting curator. So my first independent exhibition was at the Smithsonian, which was very significant in terms of my studies, my career. And, it still impacts me to this day, because I, had my books, I packed up all my books and my notes and everything that I was studying, and went to go create this exhibit. So it gave me this perspective about what my career could be. Up until that time, I thought I was going to graduate, earn my degree, and then work a decade or so or whatever, work up to working at the National African American Museum, which I thought was going to happen, in a couple of years or so. So that really set for me my professional career, because I still had to go back and finish my second year. But I was also looking at the field very differently than I was prior to that experience.
So you go to the Smithsonian for this internship, you enter your second year, you finish up there at Syracuse. What's next in your journey? Is it a position back at the Smithsonian? Is it, what are you doing after you finish the Museum Studies program?
I applied for, I wanted to continue, after having that work experience, it was, okay, well, clearly I'm not going to be working toward the Smithsonian right away. I decided to continue my education is what it was. Or the trend in my museum studies program was that my colleagues or fellow classmates would double major in master in art history, or then go on for a PhD in art history. And I looked for a PhD in African American studies. So I was considering Temple because I wanted to study with Molefe Asante, and then figured out that I could actually create an interdisciplinary way of studying at Syracuse that would allow me to combine all the things that I was very interested in, but also to put museum studies at the forefront. So I started a PhD program at Syracuse.
What was that interdisciplinary program of study like for your doctorate?
Well, it was great until I got to the dissertation. I mean, I started off with, it had to be in the humanities because I didn't want to go into education. Again, with the visual storytelling, I started out with Black female images in rap music video. And the context was music video itself, but then rap as a genre, a particular genre within that. So that was my first area of focus. And it was something that was relatable or could be adaptable to, exhibitions or content that you would have in a museum as well. So that was what I started off with. And was that in that area for a while in terms of my research and writing and building my dissertation. I left the campus and then started working. I wanted to go and start work and not just, be in the academy. So I ended up I went and worked at a museum, California African American Museum. So this was some years it wasn't right away that I was finishing up my dissertation. Fast forward, had received a job offer to come to New Orleans to create a museum studies program. Was still in that same area of study, completely lost everything in Hurricane Katrina. And so I had to go back to the drawing board for really not just my dissertation, but my career. And it was a pause in terms of figuring out if I wanted to stay in the field or not, because, I'm talking, in rapid pace about what happened, but I was really even though I had just created this graduate program in museum studies, there were some challenges in the field that really had me thinking, oh, well, maybe this is a sign that it's time to do something different and consider where I was going. I didn't know, but I felt like with losing, I had no documentation that showed I had a career in this field at all. All of my books, catalogs, even my resume and materials, things like that, were all completely lost because they were all in my office. So, I did some soul searching, decide if I was going to rebuild my career in the museum field or go on to do something different. And I decided to stay. And so I'm still here now, but it really was a moment of considering. But I believe it was the bigger picture as well. It wasn't just about, it was the challenges in the field that I felt at the time, but also, the bigger life story as well.
What was it that drew you to New Orleans to begin with?
I was invited. I had a position at the California African American Museum. I was curator of history. That was home, where I was born, lived, family, friends. A few miles away from my house. I mean, I grew up going to Exhibition Park, where I felt like this is, and I was very happy with where I was. And I received a call from Southern University inviting me to apply to, they were looking for a director of someone to create a museum studies program, a graduate program in museum studies. And back then I had an answering machine. So I had this message that I played a few times, I kept playing it because I thought, wait a minute, I'm not that far out of museum studies myself, and I'm getting this call. This is amazing. I just couldn't believe it. So it was real. Followed up on that. And I came to Southern University in New Orleans and created a graduate program in museum studies. And that's what brought me here. And I ended up, that was in 2002. I very much thought I was going to create this program, graduate the first class, at least 2 classes, and then I was going to go back to Los Angeles. And again, another mention of Katrina, it turned that's where the pause was. I evacuated, but when I made the decision to come back and to continue, I wanted to be a part of the city and rebuilding. And so I anchored in New Orleans, and I've been here ever since.
So tell us about your career path up to what you do today.
What I currently doing?
Yeah. So from that moment, from Katrina,
Mm-hmm.
the program at Southern University, from there, post Katrina up to today, what has your career path been?
Okay. So the Katrina, the difference after what happened there is really what has led me to the point I am today. I had hired one of the people that I had hired for that program, Carlos Hernandez, from the University of Puerto Rico, joined my team. And he had experience teaching online at the University of Puerto Rico. And this was in 2000, early 2000s. And my conversations with Carlos really clicked, and I understood about teaching online. I was initially thinking, this is not, I don't see this as something for museum studies. It has to be something that you're in the room, and, so I didn't really get it. But I hired Carlos, we became friends, we're still friends today. And so he helped me really understand the bigger picture. So I wrote a grant, and Carlos and I spent a year in training at LSU, Louisiana State University, in teaching online. And when the hurricane hit, we were the only certified people on campus that knew how to teach online, had been trained in it. So for our program, we had our highest level of enrollment at that time. We had about 25, 26 students that had enrolled. We were able to keep our program intact. So we created a hybrid with being online and being on ground. And then we also trained our fellow colleagues and faculty on teaching online. So it was one of those things where, a whole lot of people, us included, said, museum studies, how are they leading this effort? So if at any place it was clear to me that this could be done, museum studies could be done online, that was the wake-up call. So then I created, I went back for accreditation and had the program where I had it accredited online, had done that went back and requested accreditation for an online version. I'm sorry, accredited on ground. And so we became accredited for an online version, and we continued. So it was, our momentum, we kept it going at that point, and not being able to physically be on site. The program still exists today. I left the program in 2009 and I had an interest of teaching online and wanted to do something at a bigger level with that. So I left in 2009, and then in 2010, I started teaching in the Johns Hopkins graduate program in museum studies. And then also before that, though, I taught in the University of Oklahoma in their graduate program in museum studies for 8 years, but that was simultaneous to my work at Southern and a little bit after I left as well. So all of that online experience and perspective, and it's been 11 years now that I've been teaching at Hopkins. That is really something that I'm very much interested in and really, really enjoy. I've developed a couple courses there and have taught across the curriculum, but I really do like the online format for teaching. And also in that window of time of leaving Southern, I consulted for 10 years as well. Had some wonderful experiences, had a Fulbright in museum studies in Senegal during that period as well, which was another one of those major, life impacting perspective experiences. And since 2018, I've been working with the Mississippi Museum of Art in Jackson, Mississippi.
And what do you do for the Mississippi Museum of Art?
Well, I am the founding director of the Department of Academic Affairs. I started on a consulting project with them in 2018 for an 18-month consultancy, and I was a curator of art and civil rights for the museum and Tougaloo College. And so I curated a series of exhibitions using work from both of those collections. And the exhibits were mounted on campus in the campus gallery at Tougaloo and in the museum. And the outgrowth of the internship program that I created during that process, and also creating a course for Tougaloo College, led to conversations about professional development and academic affairs in museum. And then we received funding to launch the department in January 2020. And that department, academic affairs, we have interns each semester. We have 2 post-bac positions, a postdoc position, and a curatorial assistant position that are all under academic affairs. And the hybrid is that there's a curriculum, a written curriculum for each of those stages of professional development, where they're studying museum studies or museology in place at the same time that they're also practicing really what they're learning and what they're talking about. So it's that theory and practice hybrid that I talked about really early on that struck me and drew me to the field.
What does that work entail on a day-to-day basis for you? What do you
day-to-day? There's this thing I've been saying lately. On Mondays, I say to 20 plus people, have a great week, have a great week. Because my museum studies course opens, and I'm currently teaching museums, race, and inclusion at Hopkins. I meet with my team of my post-bacs and my postdoc. We meet, virtually, and so that's a really busy day, because that's giving everybody, reminding everybody, getting on the same page, knowing where we're going, what the week is going to be about. My encouragement of making it a great week, and that I'm here, and all of those kinds of things. And then I fan out in the week. There's a lot of managing, because of managing the different elements and aspects of it, but I also get to talk about theory. The modules are set up in teams. And so when the modules open for the museum, the people that I'm working with at the museum, there's a theme, there's reading, there's discussion that happens in two different groups there, one with post backs, one with the interns, and then with teaching, it's the same thing, but just all academic and not practical experience. I guess to answer your question, Robbie, a whole lot. I'm trying to, because it's, how it goes where you're juggling things. I try to separate things out by days. And so I try to focus on something for a particular day of the week. In my capacity as Director of Academic Affairs, I interface with all the departments in the museum because we're looking to bring people in that are interested in the field and not just, interestingly enough, it's an art museum, but we're not just curatorial focused or education. So I'm working on recruiting interns, advising and mentoring the postdocs and the postbacks. We have academic partners that I'm in communication with. We have one partner that's developing museum studies focused curriculum. We have others that are, content driven, object driven with the collection. So it varies a lot. I, would say yes, in a way it's different every day, but it's really professional development, collections. It's a little bit of everything, and just depending on the day of the week.
I want to ask you about your museum's race and inclusion course. There are students who are in my Intro to Museums class who are listening to these oral histories. Can you talk about that class? And in particular, I'm interested in kind of what your guiding philosophy is when it comes to those issues. We know that, of course, in the Black museum world, we deal with topics and issues that in the traditional white museum world would see as controversial or complicated, right? Particularly post George Floyd. So I'm wondering what your guiding philosophy is there and what that class is like.
Well, when I was first asked to teach the course, I really leaned all the way back because my initial feeling was that I've been talking about this forever. I'm really not interested in a performative discussion about race in museums, and and I don't want to be jaded, and bring that in. But I thought about it, I gave it some space, and then I said yes, and it has been the best yes ever in terms of teaching. I'm at my absolute best because I'm enjoying what I'm doing, and I feel that I've created something that my intention is to impact students, not just in my course, but the conversations that they bring to the field and their actions, their intention for action. So what's happened is that the cultural climate has shifted in a way that's allowing me to be, that allowed me to design this course in a way to incorporate wellness, historical context, to a museum course that I know for sure it wouldn't have worked before. Like I said, I was 11 years. I know where the pushback has been in the criticisms of some other things that I've done as a professor in museum studies. But the way I've structured the course is that we start with A New Earth by Eckhart Tolle is required reading. It's the first book. We spend 3 weeks on you. I say museums, race, and inclusion, but I added the you, and I added it at the beginning. And what it means is that we spend 3 weeks talking about who are you, why are you here, what do you want from this conversation? And what that does is that creates a sense of, yes, of ownership in the course, individual ownership and buy-in, but it's also accountability. Because I'm not telling you what I think you should have, you're telling me what you want. And so now what is it going to take for you to get to what you want? We spend that 3 weeks grounding ourselves, creating a community, creating a safe space, a respectful space recognizing each other's as individuals and really understanding who we're going to take this journey with. Because then the next 4 weeks are race. And I use Jason Reynolds and Ibrahim Kehinde's Stamped. But I use the remix version. And what that does is that's a deeper exploration. It's not necessarily how many pages you read, it's how well you read the pages that you're reading. And so when we go into this conversation about race, and we're particularly talking about people of African descent in the US, having that conversation, ripping the Band-Aid off of that, to me is so important. If you never have a conversation about the history and the context of slavery in this country, then you don't ever, you're talking in circles. You don't get to move forward and bring in all those other things that make a difference and are important, but we still have such tension behind that. So I have, I actually have students that say, I'm not ready to move on, or I want some more time in this, because we do really take a deep dive. And, my students are talking about everything from Thomas Jefferson to listening to Lift Every Voice and Sing by Kirk Franklin. I make it's historical, but I also make it very contemporary as well. And we have and we're talking the whole time. Then we go into inclusion. We talk about inclusion in a broader context, and then bring it into the museum field, talking about the inclusive movement that Dr. Portia Moore coined that phrase, inclusive museums. And we look at that, where that came out, where the voices were that sparked this movement that has this momentum of museums being more inclusive. And then we spend a couple weeks combining everything, looking at all three. And then the final part of it also is when I say action, action. You've said this is what you want, this is who you are. What do you want to do? I have students identify where they're going to be actionable not just when they leave the course, because there is some activity, there are people that are working in museums and have careers already. But I want them to have something that they've actually verbalized, written down what they plan to do. That can be anything, and it's what works for you. If it's in your listening, if it's in being active. I don't, want people to feel that they have to take to the streets for everything, or you have to be the loudest voice in the room to be able to make change. The only thing that we can change is our minds and our actions. And so if you're able to have something that, okay, well, this is what I can do. If someone asks this question, I have this answer, or I can contribute on this level. So that's the overview of it. And I say that it's the best experience that I'm having, because I'm watching students take this at a different level and bring a different way of being to the conversation. That's inspiring to me, because I tell you, I really was feeling like, it's time for me to tap out, not of the field or the work, but just the conversation, and just saying, like, my mouth's been going like this, for forever. I want them to be able to not just see change or point the finger for somebody else to make change, but know that they can be a part of it as well.
What do you perceive as the biggest challenges in implementing that kind of work in the museum field?
It's really a trickle down from what is still in the bigger society at large. And that is, everybody still just wants to be white. And so everybody just wants to be in, just let me in. I just want to be at the table. I just want to be included. I just got through talking about inclusion, but I didn't create this course. I've just redesigned it for teaching, because inclusion is not the bottom line for me, it's equity. And so the biggest challenge is equity on a level that really makes an impact. For example, my experience in being in the Hopkins program, I came in early on. I came in a year into the program being developed. So I was the only Black person that I know of, for a long time. And I had experiences that I was not silent about, talked to my director about some of the challenges that I had. I mean, I had a semester of students telling me, questioning my qualifications for being there, and why was I teaching at Johns Hopkins, and and so all across, so I've been included because I was at it, but the question of equity in terms of me as an instructor, me as a professor, and this real sense of, well, this person doesn't even really belong here. Now they wouldn't be able to, there would be that, I'm sure they'd even think a few more times before they put that on a survey, or they actually ask that question out loud. We don't, the climate has shifted for it. The challenge is the mindset that goes behind that, not just what people are saying, but what they're not doing. Because I've already seen it in the field where people, that have already started to push back, or the shiny Black person gets to come in and make a splash or make a show that, look, we hired this person. But the whole support team or all behind the scenes has not changed. And so that's what happens when you're not, when equity is not the first thing on the table, and that's not, the goal. It's nice. We have a lot of conversations in my courses and everything that, I'm involved with about diversity, equity, access, and inclusion, and how people are mixing those around too. But the challenge is really having people be accountable first, personally accountable, holding yourself accountable, and then having some actionable ways of that accountability being met in the field itself.
So shifting gears a little bit, can you talk about your experience and history with the Association of African American Museums at AAAM?
Sure. Yeah, I have my experience with AAAM, I was exposed as a student. When I was a graduate student, I became active early in my career. I was an outlier during my early involvement and I would say, and I say Kelly and me too, because we've always been, tag team on things. But I came into AAAM talking about this thing called, museum studies. I had a degree in museum studies, and I had this, way of talking about that as being, that was my path into the field, and got a lot of pushback from African people in the field, Black people in the field at AAAM, who were not trying to hear this person with a museum studies degree, especially when I've been doing this work and I've created my museum. So I wasn't welcome with open arms with that career path into the organization, I didn't think. And then it was then it became more of, trying to fit in or not feeling comfortable with where the organization was at the time. For me, I just didn't feel completely welcome. And because I don't feel that, I felt like I didn't have the story that went along with it. Even when I was at a Black museum, I was at the California African American Museum for 7 years. And I was a member of the organization, and I would, was going to conferences and that thing, but I didn't feel that sense of belonging in a way that, that I felt that I should be with that organization. And I felt myself in limbo because I didn't have it with AAM, but I've been a member of AAM since I was a graduate student, but it was something where I did it because, I felt like it was expected that I was do it. And the same thing with AAAM to some extent. I wasn't as active. And then I parted ways. I mean, I leaned all the way out and said, yeah, I'm tired of trying to fit in, so I'm good. And then I was, again, recruited, got a call from someone who invited me to join the board or apply, said they wanted to nominate me for the board. And I started with I don't think, and the person said, no, this is a different AAAM. We're moving in a different direction. You're welcome. your experience, your perspective, we're expanding to make that part of who we are as an organization, recognizing that. And so I came back I applied for the board or was nominated for the board and was elected and served a 4-year term. And am a lifetime member, by the way. So I support the organization, and I also believe that I can, it's not about me. It doesn't have to be, but my support, my respect, how I speak about the organization, getting other people involved in a way that it works for them or helps them. I very much believe that. I believe that all along. It was just, there was just times where I didn't feel it was as personal a fit for me.
That's real. So you've mentioned a number of folks, who are the people, particularly in the Black museum field, who have had the biggest impact on
you? I keep saying this name, I'm gonna lead with this one, and then but Kelly Willits, that was my partner in crime. That was the person that when I came to this museum studies program and completely felt like an outsider, this was the person that had my back. When I said something in class and I was speaking another language, or the wins and the losses, the challenges, and it's been a long time, so every single stage of my career, Kelly has been somebody that is in the field and supporting every stage of my career. So I have to give her such a, shout out and credit for that. And pushing me that last part of getting my dissertation done and, getting over the hump. John Fleming, I was walking the floor at a AAAM conference in Los Angeles. And he walked up to me and invited me to a AAAM reception. And I went to that reception, and, it turned my gaze on being a part of that organization and being involved. So I would say he's really the person that brought my attention and, got me involved with AAAM. Lonnie Bunch, again, I mentioned California African American Museum. I was the third curator of history at CAM. Lonnie Bunch was the first. And so I liked that, seeing somebody that was in a position that I was in that went on to have, he's had, an amazing career across any kind of board. As a historian and launching the National Museum. But the proximity to greatness probably, was one that, was pretty amazing for me. So yeah, that I guess those were the main ones, I think. Deborah Mack had a big, had an influence on me in terms of encouraging me to go forward with wanting to consult and bring my voice to AAAM on the board, and then also in my career as it went forward. So those are folks I think, off the top. And then there's just African Americans in the field. That was the question, right? Black museum professionals.
people in the Black museum field.
Black museum field. Mm-hmm.
Or African Americans. I know that they're, anybody really who's influenced you here in the work that they do.
Yeah, I have to say I've had a lot of, I always feel that I'm where I'm supposed to be. So the people that have been in the different stages, and even if I may not be naming names, I'm always learning from the people around me. I'm inspired by my students. And if I'm particularly even talking about Black students, I love the idea that, that I've had this experience where young people coming into the field, or students, or people who are questioning whether or not they can do this or whether this field is for them, to look to me, and I can, comfortably say, welcome, come on in, anything that I can do to help. That has been something that I've been doing my entire career, because I teach, and when you teach, you share and you show and you invite. So that's a big part of inspiration for me, because it motivates me to keep going, and knowing that there's another group of people that are coming after me.
So what do you tell those young people, or what are the reasons that you would encourage them to come into the field? What are the rewards? We've talked about the struggles. What are the great rewards?
The absolute greatest reward to me about the museum field is that it's fluid. It's connected to culture in a way that it doesn't allow it to be stagnant, whether it wants to or not. Whether museums want to be stagnant or not, they can't. There's some component of culture that's continuously changing and moving. And so I see that with the field. That's why I've been in as long as I've been in, because it's not about reinventing, it's about leaning in the direction of the flow. You don't have to completely change, but you don't have to, but you can't be so rigid that that I can't be so rigid that I don't learn anything new, or it's going to come to me. So that fluidity is what makes me feel that this is the best field, to be in. It's the best career choice that I've made. I've been in almost 3 decades now, and I'm still excited and still motivated and still inspired, because it's not the same thing. It's not the same thing from year to year. When we have something that happens, not just the major things that happen in our culture and in our society, it's the day-to-day things that are part of what we do, and that we have a role in creating the stories to be able to share those things. And so storytelling never gets old. That's really what the field is about. Cultural recognition, identity preservation, that's part of what the field is about. Reading, writing, and arithmetic is what I say. I've talked to, really young elementary school age kids and explaining to them about the field, numbers, you have to do math so you can budget. You're writing exhibition texts and stories, you're sharing in visual and objects. So all of those things that make up the field. I talked about that in my dissertation, A to Z, accountants to zookeepers. It's something that so many people, in my experience in my lifetime, have said it's something that they're interested in, or it's something that they're curious about, and also something that it's a career shift. I've had in my courses, I had a sitting judge in a course one semester who was working, planning her retirement, and she was going to come into the field. I have a veterinarian in one of my current courses who, she's been in that field for a long time. She's ready to make a change. And then all those ones in between, where people, it's a field that people are interested in being involved in contributing in, and it's open to whatever background and skill set that you bring to the table. There's some way to apply it in the museum field. It's fascinating to me, the differences that I've seen, people bring into the field.
And we have a vet on the board of AAAM now, Dr. Bert Davis. Literally from A to Z.
I need to connect him. I'm always trying to network with my students.
He's great. We can definitely make that happen. And he's one of the people who's been interviewed for this project. Wow. So his oral history is up on our site. So you've talked about the field a lot. What is your vision for the future of the field and where it's going?
My vision is that we create something new. I'm hearing the people that talk about, and I did myself, I talked about inclusion, I talked about equity. I'd like to see something beyond that. I'm waiting for the person that comes and says, I want to take this concept and I want to take it to another level. And I want to create a different platform or a different venue or a different way of, we're talking about telling stories and sharing stories and all of those things, that artifact collection, those things. There's a different way to do it without the term museum. What would that look like? And what would it look like not to just build on top of what's here, but to create something that's a completely different way of looking. That to me would be the vision, and wanting to see how that happens and what that looks like. And I'm somebody who 20 years ago questioned whether or not museum studies could be taught online. And I've been teaching museum studies online for over a decade now. And the possibilities of where I sit in teaching online are endless. I love the options that I have and what can happen. And so there's so much more room for growth in there. I'd like to see some of that talked about, not just in exhibitions, not just in programming, but in the whole idea about what a museum is and what it looks like and what it feels like to be one, in one, or what it feels like as an institution going forward.
So the last question here, speaking to the students, what are your recommendations for them, for those who really want to do this work and get into this field? What would you say to them? What would be your closing comments for them?
Talk to the people that are in the field. I certainly can't be alone with my belief that if a student reaches out to me, back in the day when there used to be phone calls, if you call me, I'm going to have a conversation with you. If you email me, I'm going to respond to your email. I will answer your questions. And like I said, it can't just be me. There are people in the field that will do that. So if you're curious and you're interested, ask questions, ask specific questions, ask about yourself. Don't come and say, what would it be like? What would you say to a Black person in the, no. Who are you? What do you want? How do you want to contribute? Be very specific. Ask the questions for people that are doing what you think you might want to do, because it's going to do one thing. It's going to clarify whether you want to continue in that direction or whether you want to go someplace else. And maybe there's another person that you need to ask then. But ask the questions if it's something that you think you might want to do or something that you're interested in doing. And then once you have that clarification, mentorship. I've never in my career not had a mentor. And so you have mentors at all different stages of your career, all different stages of your life, but don't feel like you have to know everything. Allow somebody to help you, allow somebody to show you something or tell you something and give you a sense of direction that you may not have thought about before. And find something, find somebody in the field that's willing to mentor you. That to me is the best way. This field is a very small field. People know each other, and you'd be surprised how, that question that you think is a non-starter is something that somebody can actually answer for you, put you in touch with somebody that can help you experience, something. I see it happen very fast. So ask the questions, be specific, make it for you, and then have a mentor. And somebody that you can talk to as you move through.
Dr. Redell Hearn, thank you so much. This has been wonderful and my great pleasure to spend this time with you.
Thank you. Same here, Robbie. Thank you so much for having me.